the revolution that they've helped engineer by rigging the economy and screwing everybody, and then use that to engineer a false socialist revolution to bring in even more control that the very same cronies are supporting because they're offshore and exempt from it and want to work with a more centralized government. So,
yeah, and that's more of a something for nothing economy doesn't work. What happens if these bubbles burst? Then the cost of education is going to plummet, and healthcare, and a lot of things. And the rich aren't going to have this financial advantage from owning highly appreciated assets when not having to work. It will shift the balance back to the everyday person. This is exactly what happened in the Great Depression. It was a great reset. We had bubbles back there in the 20s. It got extreme, rich versus everyday people. When the bubbles burst, yes, it hurt the everyday person at first, but from then on, the everyday person's income and wealth grew faster than the richest. So we need this reset. It is false to say, oh, we can take this bubble economy and now engineer it for the everyday person. No, this is definitely being engineered against the everyday person.
And I think the establishment has not been reading history books. Elites almost never get away with what they're attempting right now.
Exactly. No, it never lasts. I just did a big issue in my newsletter on this income inequality. When it gets to these extremes, it never lasts. It tells you you're at the top of a major stock market and bubble peak that will not be seen for decades, and you're going to have to go through a big reset. And that's what we try to help people do in our book. And, by the way, our book today on harrydentresearch.com, it's free if you just pay shipping and handling $4.95, because we want people to hear this. If you look at what we say and listen to what people like you say, it's absolutely clear what's going on. There's nothing unclear about it at all.
Well, I didn't know that. I mean, sometimes people say free book, and then it's $15 for shipping. $4.99. I mean, that really is what shipping costs.
That's what it costs us. That's not even the cost of the handling.
Well, that's amazing. So you're offering the book free today?
Sure, yeah. You guys pay $5 for shipping, and basically you get a free book.
Well, harrydentresearch.com. Everybody needs to get the book. It's excellent. I want to go to some phone calls now. Let's go ahead and talk to Steve in North Carolina. Thanks for holding her on the air.
Hello, gentlemen.
Go ahead.
Your watchers have limited time and information to do researching. I've kind of stumbled on some information that I just wanted to verify with you guys that is kind of...
Sure, brother. Go ahead and ask your question.
Basically, what it has to do with is Goldman Sachs. They had an article they posted back in 2007, 2008 on their website called BRICS Beyond. We gave $10 billion in bailout money to Goldman Sachs.
Well, it's a lot more than $10 billion worth, but yeah.
$10 billion.
There's a lot more than $10 billion.
Was it? Mm-hmm. Okay, like I said, limited time research is what we have. But what I'm getting to is that kind of threw a cog in my spokes, because the IMF versus the BRICS, the petrodollar, things that are going on. To find out that Goldman Sachs that we bailed out is heading up and constructing the BRICS is what this document states.
Yeah, they're heavily involved. It's Trilateral Commission. They're building 3 giant global corporate super governments and transferring national sovereignty into those. Senator Goldwater leaked it all back when they were first proposing it. And so when they claim that the Federal Reserve System is in competition with the BRICS, it's total theater, at least at one level. The Russians and Chinese are wanting to move to BRICS, thinking it's their alternative, but it's part of the same larger structure, in my view. But that's a really great question. Hundreds of billions since 2008 have been given to mainly foreign banks out of the banker bailout package. Mr. Dent, your comment on that statement.
Yeah, and more than that, just the U.S. alone, $3.5 trillion in free money printing. They buy these bonds, inject new money into the financial system. If they'd have given this $3.5 trillion to households, we could have sent $30,000 per household. Don't you think people would rather have that? This has all gone into financial institutions. It's been more like 10 to 11 trillion worldwide. So yes, there's bailout money, there's special interest money, but this broad QE is just creating money that goes into financial institutions and turns into a gambling casino. Goldman Sachs makes most of their money not on investment banking anymore, and these brokerage firms don't do it as much on brokerage or banks on banking. They're speculating on markets that are rigged where they can leverage up, borrow money for nothing, leverage up, and make high profits on low-risk investments until the bubbles burst. And then they all go down, and then they're all going to be wanting bailouts again.
Sure.
I mean, Goldman Sachs is the last person anybody should give a bailout. They do just fine on their own greed.
Thank you so much, Steve. We got to jump. Jerry in West Virginia, go ahead.
Alex, thank you for taking my call. I'm calling for the closure of the United Nations in New York. It is the biggest joke and the waste of money. It appears to be doing nothing, never did anything, and it just...
well, it's trying to usurp U.S. sovereignty, so it does do something. It basically is a criminal organization.
I beg your difference. I don't think it does anything, but I think with the collapse of the U.S., the only outlet we have is to start a war with Ukraine, to get everybody taken away from the realities of the war, just like sports do. And thirdly, I would like to see everybody out, the politicians, and out their foibles and out their roundabout ideas, and then begin to really put the pressure on the politicians that they fess up to their faults, and that may be a way of getting back at some of the revenge we need to do at the moment. I'm 73, and I'm worried about the future of social
No, I hear you, brother. I hear you. They're planning to loot that. Quick question for Dent. He can answer it after the break. Do you have any questions for Dent?
Yes, I have a question. What's happening to Social Security?
Great question, Jerry. We'll try to answer that straight ahead. They're getting ready to loot the education funds. That ought to tell you where they're going. Private education funds. It's more than 3 months ago, 5 months ago. Russia deploying tactical nuclear arms in Crimea. NATO's tactical nuclear weapons must go. Being moved in up against Russia. Does Russia think their new nuclear weapons could win a war? Forbes. No longer unthinkable. Should U.S. ready for limited nuclear war? Breaking out of defense. Russia has threatened nuclear attack, says Ukraine defense minister. Newsweek. Well, we saw an explosion that looks like a nuke and damaged houses 15 miles away. I'm not saying it's not a chemical plant, but it's not getting a lot of attention in Ukraine, and it looks bad. And I've grown up in Texas and seen chemical plants blow up, and they have multiple explosions afterwards that are just as big or bigger. So this does not look like anything I've ever seen but a nuke. That doesn't mean that it was a nuke, but it's okay to ask that question because we're not getting the truth out of Russia. That's coming up. Right now, Cliff, thanks for holding. You're listening on 90.1 in Austin. Go ahead, Cliff. You're on the air.
Yes, sir. Hey, glad I got you. Hey, have you ever heard of the Shemitah by Jonathan Cahn?
You know, my audio is breaking up a little bit from you. Maybe you're clear to Dent, but I can't really understand you. Have I ever heard of what?
The Shemitah. It's a book by Jonathan Cahn.
No, I haven't. Tell us about it.
Well, he gives the aspect of everything that's been happening in our world. God has allowed it to happen because we haven't been following his ways. So I would suggest that you get the book because it says a lot about our country in it and what's going to happen. And this is only part of what's been going on as far as God allowed the World Trade Center to be brought down because of our arrogance.
Well, I do think that great wealth creates great decadence and arrogance, and then corruption sets in. And I am a Christian. One of my biggest problems is the establishment churches are telling people not to be politically involved. And so America's moral compass seems to be broken. Let me get Mr. Dent's take on that.
Yeah, no, I just find the same thing. I don't comment on religion because you know, you turn off people or not. But I see the same thing. When things get this extreme in wealth and stuff, everything gets corrupted by the special interests. A small group of people have so much power at every level in religion and politics and business that it cannot be any other way. That's why we have cycles. You know, God, the universe, natural systems never go too far in one direction without resetting and going the other direction. We can't go up forever without getting way out of balance, and we can't go down. And when things go up, people think they'll go up forever, and that's why I talk to people. I prove to them otherwise. And when things go down, people think it'll go down forever. Neither is true. These ups and downs correct each other. That's why capitalism works better than top-down planning.
I just had the crew pop in my head. We're actually going to be interviewing on air next month the author of the book that the caller just raised. So thank you, caller, for calling in with that information. Now, before we go any further with our guest, and by the way, that book is, he's also written the book, The Harbinger. Again, if you're a radio listener, it sounds like I'm bumbling around. It's because they're flashing stuff on screen in live time. So this is a transmission where we're very interactive and things are unfolding as we go along here. Let's go ahead now and go to another caller. Let's go ahead and talk to Dylan in Illinois. Dylan, you're on the air.
Hi. Yes, I noticed that the oil prices has not only affected Russia, but affected China's real estate prices to go down and causing slow growth in their economy in the last 4 months. And it's affected Texas housing boom, and retail stores are closing and malls are closing. How do you know if a real estate crash is coming from China, biggest bubble?
Well, I mean, you know, Dent's been saying that China's going to be the big place to see the bubble probably first breaking. I just saw the Chinese government come out and revise their numbers last week. I saw a lot of analysts say that clearly now China has crested and is starting to really accelerate a downward spiral. Can you elaborate on that, Harry?
Yeah, first of all, China has to be growing slower than they say because they never tell you the truth there, or commodity prices wouldn't be falling because China is the largest buyer of commodities to feed their export and industrial machine in the world now by far. So I mean, that's one thing. Yes, commodities going down and oil is good for the everyday person long term, but it is going to cause some huge disruptions. There's $6 trillion owed in U.S. dollars to banks and bondholders from emerging country companies who depend on commodity prices, and they're going to start defaulting. These frackers who invested $1 trillion, created 1 million jobs, like you say, especially in Texas, and a whole real estate boom that went much stronger than the last one there, that's going to implode because these guys are dead. They have to have over $80 to really make it long term, and under 55, they really start doing terrible. They're not going to reinvest when their wells run out. They're not going to be able to pay back their debts, and you got $500 billion there. So I actually see this oil collapse as a trigger to the next worldwide debt crisis. We have way more debt than anybody knows. So all it takes is a trigger, just like the subprime crisis. It wasn't the whole crisis last time. It was the trigger that got the markets to start thinking about debt and worrying about debt. And the more you look around and worry about debt, you say, holy smokes, we got more debt than anybody knows, and the whole thing comes down. So I think this is a very important trigger. I've been telling people, watch oil to finally bounce here. And boy, it's barely bouncing, and it really crashed. I think oil is going to turn around in the next few months and go back down to $30 or something like that. And then people are going to have to realize these frackers and a lot of these emerging country exporters are dead, and there's going to be a lot of debts that aren't going to be paid.
So you don't think oil is stabilized? You think more volatility is coming?
Well, I think it'll stable. We've said for a long time, oil, if it broke 80, it's dead, which it did. It's ultimately going to $10 to $20 in the next several years, but it'll probably vary between $10 and maybe...
So it still will be volatile, just going down overall?
Yeah, it's not just going to go down and stay down, but it's going to be between 10 and 70. Most oil companies can't make it over 45, traditional ones. Most frackers can't make it under 55.
What did it, though? I mean, it was already glut was going in that direction, but the Saudis, are they just trying to pick the time it starts its descent?
Well, the Saudis are playing like Rockefeller in the early 1900s. They are the low-cost producer with some of the largest reserves. They're not cutting their production because they want prices to go down. They want to eliminate their competition so they can be a dominant producer longer term. They're going to knock out the frackers. They're going to knock out the tar sands in Canada, Venezuela, and Iran. Many countries like that are just going to fall by the wayside and never come back. That means Saudi Arabia is going to have higher prices and more dominant.
And Venezuela then will completely implode.
Oh, yeah, Venezuela's dead. I mean, they can't even make it at 100, nevertheless at 55.
And so that's why their lights aren't on now half the time. I mean, they are already rotting.
Yeah. And Russia, I mean, oil is and energy is their largest export sector. And their government...
Can you imagine they got a communist government that's run everybody off, kicked all the entrepreneurs out, and now their oil economy's dead. That is going to be a hellhole inside a hellhole. Caller, thank you so much. Really great question. You know, what scares me, Harry, is that I don't think I've ever historically seen a bubble this big